Hey guys, going to be going through my findings on star forts today and a hunch I've had for a while as well on what I believe caused the mudfloods or what could have caused the mudfloods. But not just that, I want to ask a few questions of how did they build these with the tools that they had at that particular time period, and why have they been targeted? Because as I'll show you over the course of this video, they are systematically have been targeted. The picture in the background you see there is Italy, and the date on it says 1746. Why were they so keen to wipe these out? And why, still to this day, do they not really tell us about these? Let's get stuck in. So we're going to go through a few cities I found in a collection of George III, I believe. It's a royal collection that he's accumulated over the years. And this is Antwerp. I highly recommend you going through this collection. I'll put the link in the description. So here's a closer up version of it just to show you that they existed in 1584. But how are they building these things and carving them out of the hillsides? I'll show you in a minute of what some of these places look like today, because you can still see the faint imprints of some. Look how big it was. I'll show you a few more examples of it. So here's Antwerp today. Like most of them, it's almost unrecognisable to the maps of old. I'll just take this off so it's a bit easier to show you. So if you look at, here's the borders. So they're all in a line. Been covered up. They go all the way. If you look at these as well, it gives you a clue to how some of the others would have been, and they're very similar to ones in Portsmouth, England, which I'll touch on later. It was actually the main reason I started to do this research in the first place. I've realised over the months to find clues in England, because there's not, they seem to have destroyed them a lot more over here than they have in other countries, so you haven't got many traces of them left. You've got Portsmouth and Portland, and that's about it really, of the old star cities. I mean, because essentially all these places, it weren't just the odd fort. These were all part of a bigger system. As you see in this picture I'm just putting up now, these cities were absolutely everywhere, and I think it was just, that was just the way they were built originally. I mean, I've shown you evidence for obviously 1586 was it, but I believe like many others they've been around far longer than that, and they've had to destroy the evidence of these largely, and this is why they don't tell us, because if you really look into these star forts you quickly realise how on earth did they build them. Here's some of the tools they were using in the 17th and 18th centuries. Do you think these tools are capable of pulling off the precision and accuracy, symmetry that they've pulled off willingly in hundreds, if not thousands of cities across the world? You know how good I am at my pronunciations. Fort de Nossa Senhora de Graça. So, to give you an idea of the carving that goes on, just look. This is probably the most complete star fort, I would say, still around. The whole area around it is really amazing. Look at this one over here. You've almost got the whole city that's still intact as well. But what I was getting at is how are people in the 16th and 17th century carving this out of the hillside? And not to mention, the official story for star forts are for military purposes, because they worked out that strategically they could fire cannons from every single angle, and yeah. But star forts existed way before cannons were even invented, so you can debunk that with that statement straight away. But more to the point, yeah, so again, you've got to ask the question, if they're building these things strategically for military purposes, for war, I mean, surely if it was an emergency war situation, you wouldn't be making elaborate designs. I mean, how long is that going to take in the 16th century to carve it out of the hillside? 25, 30, 40 years? Hurry up, Pablo. The French are coming. That's just a few of the more spectacular maps that I've sort of come across. But at the end of the video, I will leave a very large selection of different cities from the Royal Collection of King George III, the one I mentioned earlier. So if we go back to this photo of Italy, you've got Milan in the centre. But if you look at all the villages, it's got a river going through it, which I think is highly significant, which I'll elaborate on. Some of you will be aware of this, but canals, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that they were built rather than occurring naturally. So there's a lot of evidence to suggest that the cities were built and then the waterways carved into them afterwards. Michelle Gibson and a number of others have done some amazing research on it, and I highly recommend you watch all her videos because she has done some fantastic research. She's taught me so much. What she talks about largely is the riverways being their way of transporting stuff and moving around. So we got Brabant here in the Netherlands, and again, just wanted to show you the significance of all the waterways being connected to all the cities. So there's a whole line of them here. And literally every single one is on a waterway, on a river. very needy cat on my lap as well, as you can probably hear. But yeah, every single one. So this is a battle in 1914, World War One in Antwerp. Let's read you a paragraph. After several days of fierce fighting, both sides were exhausted. The Belgian defenders made the decision to open the sluice gates at Newport so as to allow the tidal sea water to enter the flat reclaimed land between the banks of the Sarre River and the Newport-Dixmude railway line. By deliberately flooding this land, it was hoped that the German plans for a breakthrough here would be stopped. In 1585, after the 80 Years' War, there was the siege on Antwerp. During that siege, in response to the closure of the Scheldt by this bridge, the Dutch flooded the lowlands adjacent to the Scheldt, effectively submerging most roads in scattered areas and leaving Spanish forts either flooded or isolated in small islands. So what I'm getting at is, it wasn't the first time it had been done.
The main goal of building dams is, of course, prevention of floods. In some particularly humid regions of the world, the water level can rise following heavy rains, and this can result in catastrophic flooding. Dams are often built to create a water reservoir, which in turn can be used both for general purposes and for agricultural needs. After diverting the waterway, the water in the valley spills and forms a perfect reservoir for such purposes. Unfortunately, it often floods a large area around it. That is why it is so important to evacuate the local people before the construction of large dams. For example, at the beginning of this century, about 1.3 million Chinese were relocated to other cities because of the construction of the giant Three Gorges Dam. The reservoir formed by the waters of the Yangtze River flooded 13 cities, 140 towns, and 1,350 villages. And finally, another, and perhaps the most important goal of building dams in the 21st century is the generation of power. The dams are built together with the hydroelectric power station, which captures the energy of falling water to generate electricity.
3, 2, 1...
The dam has to be very high so that the difference in water level before and after the barrier is as large as possible. After reaching the dam, the collected water passes through the locks in its wall and falls down. It passes through the huge blades of hydraulic turbines, and those, in turn, power electric generators.
Suspicious layout of the land? Yeah, I noticed it too. So, if you look at Crimea, for example, the whole of the landscape almost has been changed. The whole shape of the island or peninsula or whatever you want to call it. I'll zoom in. So if you look at the areas at the top and to the very west where the arrows are pointing, and just look at how much the landscape has changed. Now my hunch, I'd give you, it was a few clues in that video, is a lot of these cities were hydraulically powered by dam systems, and the water pressure valves and the sluice gates would control the pressure. Now were either these sluice gates or the dams altogether destroyed? Because I'll show you the way the land lies now compared to what you're seeing in front of you now. Totally different shape, isn't it? Again, I'll take this off. So the main area I want you to concentrate is, look, is totally flooded. That's the original pond is there. And it's flooded all this area. And if you go to the end, right to the west, similar sort of scenario. And also if you look at, that's where the old Starfort used to be. This is what they do. They turn them all into quarries. Anywhere an old Starfort is, you'll find a quarry very close by. And again, it categorically proves they are purposely digging these out to wipe them from history. And it's disguised as quarries. I mean, this is a great example where I live, up the road in Portland. And the whole of, well, lots of London is built with Portland stone. And I'd love to know what it actually looked like before they destroyed it. But yeah, I'm going off subject. If we now do actually go over to the west, like I mentioned at the start, it's a huge area that's been flooded. And if you look on the old map of Crimea, a lot of the Starforts were around that area as well. It's almost like this tip has been exposed, and it's flooded that part. And look at the way it floods as well. So it's like a curved line. I'll show you what I mean by that later in the video. This is Portsmouth in Hampshire, England. This is one of only 2 star bastion cities that are left, well, that you can find evidence for, i.e. there's maps or you can see visual evidence. There are bastions dotted about around the country, but I mean the actual star cities, how they used to be. I'm sure some of the other cities around the country have been at some point, but they've managed to hide that. But I think it's really important to keep this knowledge alive, otherwise they will just hide it. This is literally the only visible part left. And I took a picture of it a couple of months ago when I went down there. But as you can see, by and large, it's pretty unrecognisable. And would you believe it? Say, look on the left-hand side, rather than calling it east or west so I don't get mixed up. But would you believe it? The Starfort is flooded, or largely flooded. Here's a World War II bombing map. Very interesting, isn't it? And if you come up here, it doesn't actually show it on that particular map, which again makes you think how many of these maps are about which are not available to source online. Because this isn't, I can't find any map for this, but the similarities with Antwerp. So you've got a whole line of them here. So one here, another one there. Another one there. One's been... It's not a quarry, is it? Oh. But yeah, they line. And I think the official narrative for these as well is it's four forts built. If you look here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I think that's another one there, the roundabout. Yeah, there is that. You can see the 7. So straight away, the official narrative is utter bullshit. I can't remember which fort, part of the fort this is in Portsmouth. But if you look at the archways and the dips in the ground, you can tell that there used to be waterways. There's waterworks all around the area. And some little extras. If I wasn't so far away from the car, I would have taken it home. So let's go to my neck of the woods. So, as I mentioned, I've had a hunch for a while now with what could possibly cause the mud floods, the possible flooding. Now, I know there's a sluice gate. I believe it's here for Weymouth. Now, my hunch also is that some of these breakwater structures are possibly old sluice gates or dams. So imagine a scenario. All that area there, the water is either held back or it's regulated. Well, it is basically a part of the Navy, MOD, that part now. But yeah, imagine you've got gates there and it's regulating the water pressure, and someone comes in, destroys that, bombs that, also destroys the gate here. Where would all that water go? Would it go down this edge here possibly, where all the water is? There's just a flood marshy bit here. And like we saw with Crimea, like I mentioned earlier, look at the curve. Me and my friend have talked about this for a long time, who's also on a similar trail as what I am with Portland and Weymouth. But that is not, it's different. The layout to the land is different to what it used to be. And again, imagine a scenario, right, where say they destroy these gates and the dams, if there were there, because there is a dam here as well. You destroy the dam. Say it flooded all this area, all around here, all around Weymouth. What would it look like if you came back after evacuation or after it had been totally destroyed, flooded? What would it look like? Would it bury buildings in mud, possibly? Could it also be going back to the rivers, the waterways in all the villages? Does it also give an explanation for all the mud flooded towns that are also inland? Because that's one thing that's always puzzled me. By the way, Portland is an absolutely amazing place. It is the last sort of traces of a Star Fort. But if you look at Portland, they've absolutely destroyed the place. Quarries galore. Like I mentioned earlier, I would love to have seen what this place used to look like before they destroyed it. But it is a super interesting place. I've not even skimmed the surface with it yet. This stretch of road as well has always been historically prone to flooding. Now, this is where the train line, you can probably see the traces of it, used to run along here. Now, people have lived on this island for hundreds and hundreds of years, well outlived the rail systems. Do you not think, and to be fair, I need to get local guys to know this because it's called Chesil Beach, and I say up until a few years ago, I know it still does flood, and I think they've sorted out the defences to an extent, but it still is a risk of flooding. So do you not think it would have been very dangerous to be building a railway track on a piece of land floods all the time? Would it not suggest it's more of a modern day problem? I mean, did they not think to fix all these things hundreds of years ago? Bergenop zoom. I am going to do a second part on this, I think solely concentrating on the villages that have been flooded, but I wanted to just give you a couple more examples. If you look on the map towards, the old map towards the left, there never used to be this part here. So whatever's happened, whatever system's been destroyed there is causes flooding. Hamlin, again, pretty unrecognisable, like a lot of them are. It's hard to find any traces at all. One thing I did notice though as I was looking through, is that a dam? Again, like I've mentioned, if these systems were destroyed and it flooded large areas and it was left abandoned, apocalyptic style for 30-40 years, would buildings be buried? This is Weymouth seafront, just to give you an idea. Pretty much every single building is down a level. Some people say, well, it's just the way you used to build them, and cellar rooms, what have you. But these buildings, for example, are right on the seafront. I mean, this is below the water level, this bit here. A whole another level. Wouldn't it be a bit silly to do this right on the seafront, like logically wise? And I'll leave you with a selection of King George I.